Starting. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sigma Software webinar. Today we have Accelerated Change Cybersecurity. My name is Olga, and I'm going to be moderating the session today. A couple of words about myself. I've been in software engineering for about 13 years and also have been with Sigma Software for 10 years. And throughout my experience, I was always working closely with development teams to improve day-to-day operations and stay focused on building great and meaningful products with our customers. And also, I'm an active member of the proposal group at Sigma, where we shape business ideas together with our customers and define most beneficial ways to approach execution. So while we might have some of the attendees still joining us, I wanted to ask our audience to introduce yourself. It's really important for us to understand who we have here today. So we have shared a URL to Cyolo service where you can find a separate tab, which is a poll where you can enter some information about yourself. That's your company, your role, about your business. We will see the results later as everyone fills in the information and have a clear picture of who we have here today. So also a quick story about what Sigma Software webinars are for. So the goal is to stay closer to our partners and clients during the challenging period. So when the borders are closed and our minds are open, we are still keen to share the knowledge and to cheer up each other during this really challenging time and still build meaningful connections. So the series of webinars are called Accelerated Change, and some of us argue if COVID has really changed anything, but we all probably agree that it probably has just accelerated the inevitable shift to a digital-first life, our personal life, and also life of our businesses. So this is the 6th webinar in a row that Sigma Software has arranged together with partners and our friends from all over the globe. So many thanks to the co-organizers and our partners, and also to the wonderful team that we have here today to support us. So let me name the co-organizers and our partners. So we have UpNotch, which is a membership app for executives, entrepreneurs, and rising stars. Their mentors are C-level executives who have built companies, scaled teams, and also solved big problems. Among our partners, we have Zag, an independent growth consultancy born inside one of the world's most creative agencies, BBH. Zag gets to the heart of what makes your brand different, bringing it to life in ways that build meaningful customer connections. We also have Sigma Software Labs, a platform for boosting startups empowered by Sigma Software business connections and technical expertise. Thank you very much, guys, for your trust and also for your support. So, a couple of words on housekeeping today. We have some rules. They're pretty simple and straightforward. So we will start from the really quick self-introduction by our speakers. It should really be quick because we have tons of questions today. After that, we will jump to the main part of the event. And it will end up with the Q&A session. So if you guys, our audience, if you have any questions or comments throughout the course of the event or directly during the Q&A session, please use the comment section. It should be on the right side from the YouTube page. Good. So let's start. I have to say that personally, I'm very happy to be joining exactly this session. And it's really an interesting subject for me because I think that we all as just human beings experience the shift from being in our offices, enjoying life, and then going home, having same day every day together and doing everything online. And apparently, life might have become easier because we have more and more things that we can approach through websites, quick payments made through the app. And while it's giving us convenience, it's also opening new doors and giving more opportunities for cyber criminals to interfere with our lives and lives of our businesses. So I feel that this subject might be really complicated, but really touching everyone in this life. So another really quick word about questions. So during the registration, we got questions from our audience, and we converted them to the list of questions in Slido. So when we would be shifting to the Q&A session, I'm asking you guys to upvote the most interesting questions that seem to be most important to discuss first, and we will start from them. So let me introduce our speakers. We have invited guys from the US, from Israel and Ukraine, and guys have really extensive experience and a wonderful team to discuss this important subject today. So let's start. Guys, feel free to just be the one who wants to be the one first. Alexey?
I can be the first.
My name is Alexey. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we have a kind of a problem because Alexey and Olesya, that might sound in some cases, you know. So, okay, let's do ladies first. Olesya, please.
Okay. Sorry for this misunderstanding. Hello, everybody. I can say it's nice to meet you because I only can receive your questions in result of our conversation today. For 20 years, I work in banking sector, and most of my competence is understanding what threats are actual for banking industry. Last 10 years, my concentration is in cross-country threats and to help law enforcement in our region to work and to research cyber crimes. And last 4 years, I represent Ukraine in the advisory group on financial services in Europol, where I bring my competence and knowledge about what is going on in our region in post-Soviet countries. That's all.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olesya. So Olesya is a deputy director and head of payment card security forum in Ukrainian Interbank Payment Systems Members Association. Thank you, Olesya. Let's move on. We have Alexey Stoletny, who is CTO of Clean.io, the USA.
Hi, nice to meet you all. My name is Alexey. My background is software development and engineering for over the past 15 years, and throughout this time I've worked with team at Sigma and built up the cybersecurity competence within Sigma, led the US development within Sigma and things like those, and as well as that, over the past few years, worked with one of the cybersecurity startups that emerged recently called Clean.io, that focuses on solving untrusted JavaScript code execution in client-side environments, things like malicious advertising or malvertising, and e-commerce solutions protections and things like those. Look forward to discussing the questions, and I'm glad to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexey. Wonderful. Let's move on. We have Hardt, a founder of Sign.in.org and also an advocate of Identity 2.0, the USA.
Hi, thanks for inviting me onto this. My background probably intersects more on the edge of security from an identity point of view. So the last 15 years, probably 20 years, been working heavily around identity topics. One of my earlier companies, ActiveState, moved heavily into the anti-spam market, where you really need to figure out who it was that was sending something. Since then, worked on a number of standards. what became OAuth 2, JSON Web Tokens, and OpenID and OpenID Connect. Still pretty active around standards with respect to that. And I think of identity both in the concept of people, both consumers and enterprise, as well as systems and software. How do you know who they are?
Wonderful. Thank you, Dick. Good. We also have Almog Apirion today, CEO and co-founder of Cyolo Israel. Hey. Almog, I'm sorry, but you are on unmute.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
My name is Almog, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cyolo. Cyolo securely connects on-site and remote users and their devices to the organization's applications, servers, desktops, and files in any network and in the cloud. A little bit about my background. So in the past 6 years, I've been the CISO and the Cyber and IT Director of a global corporation with over 60 offices around the world. And in this position, I was in charge of both IT and cybersecurity. Prior to that, I've served in the Israeli Navy for 15 years. And in my last roles, I was in charge of both IT and combat system security and the commander of the Navy's cybersecurity unit. I'm very glad that you invited me to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Almog. Good. And also we have Alex Romero today, CEO of Cyberpeace, the USA. Alex?
Hi, how are you? It's great to be here. Thank you so much. I am very excited to share some of the experiences we've had in this very big adventure, which is cybersecurity. I started actually kind of like by mistake 25 years ago at Microsoft Corporation. And it was because I found a 0-day, again, by mistake. And then from there, I guess they decided that I had this malicious mindset, so they made me be in charge of creating all the structure and at that time what is now the secure development lifecycle and the threat modeling and all sorts of things. So that's how I started, and then from there we created a company that was focused on assessments, all the things that are the pen testing and vulnerability management. And from there, we created what we now have as a SOC, or Security Operations Center. We provide managed detection and response services to companies. And it's been very exciting to see how things have changed from 20 years ago, and then from now with COVID, which it's crazy. I think we've seen an exponential growth on the attacks, and that's something that we can talk about. So great to be here. Thank you so much, and very nice to meet you.
Thank you, Alex. And so we will start from a common question to everyone, and our question is, within the current reality, what are the new risks in cybersecurity industry? So it might be a really generic question, but I think that it will move our direction to then separate sub-subjects. So who wants to start first? Dick, what do you think?
It's always fun to go first because then I get to say things that everybody else gets to say. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, as people have mentioned, there's been literally an explosion of more and more traffic as more people are going online from home for their personal activity, as well as working from home for work. The digital transformations of retail outlets and the digital transformations in enterprises have rapidly been accelerated. Contacts I have in a number of the really big brands, in enterprise software are on fire because of all their customers are trying to accelerate all their digital transformations. The identity management companies are overwhelmed of everyone trying to figure out how do they manage all of their workers that are now working remote as opposed to being on premise. And of course, all of that remote work is a rapidly broadened threat and surface, because now so many people that maybe aren't used to working from home are working from home and don't know all the right processes. I'm sure many of you saw the breach that happened at Twitter last night, where some of the employees were compromised, and it'll be very interesting to see how the industry responds to that. As can we really trust who people are online because maybe their account was compromised?
Yeah. As you said, like we used to go home just to be home and enjoy our life, but now we have to do work there. And I just recalled how it started for me, where you have all of the devices brought home, and they are mixed with all of the devices that are used at home for various purposes. So it's really difficult for people who are not used to really strong procedures to protect themselves, to stay and keep all of the processes within just single environment, but to address them to personal life, to into work life. Thank you. Let's move. Alex, would you like to contribute to this question?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start with I agree with that, as you said, Vic. Well, but it's real. I think, as I said previously, the number of attacks we've seen, they've increased a lot. And that's because a lot of people are moving online, and a lot of people that don't have any knowledge on security or any awareness on that. I mean, my dad is now buying stuff online. He's sharing stuff now because that's the only way, or he's connecting to video conferences with his friends. And he thinks that everything is secure by default, which is quite contrary. And so that obviously the attackers are taking use of that. And we've seen a bunch of servers that are getting online nowadays, and they just share them because from one day to the other, they have to access all the information that they had in the office. And now they are working from home. So they send the IT guy and it's like, put it on the internet. And I don't care how, because we need to continue operations, right? And obviously these servers are not secure. And so from one day to the other, you have this perimeter just grew a bunch, and that's just honey for the attackers, right? And because I saw one of the questions there, and it was interesting. It said that they're seeing a bot that is attacking, or not attacking, but they're like trying to guess something on the credit card or of form of this e-commerce site. And the question was, is this something that we're seeing as a trend, or am I getting attacked? And I would answer that with both. Yes. Yes, it's a trend. Yes, you are getting attacked. And the thing here is that with all the technology that attackers now have, they can broaden their attacks just in a volume that is crazy. We used to put honey nets, which is servers that we put online just to make sure and see how things are going. And we saw that I don't know, like 6 months ago, we put on a server, and maybe took them for a week for the attackers to find it. And now it takes just a couple of hours for them to find it and actually exploit it. And we start seeing at the malware they put in it, and it's quite interesting. It's getting very sophisticated. So for sure, this perimeter that just got increased of the number of people that are now working online and are connected online and thinking that is secure by default is just something that the attacker is going to take advantage of. So that's where we come in. That's where we should be very enthusiastic about advocating cybersecurity from the point of view of culture. And that's where we come in, and that's where we can help. So yeah, it's very exciting times, but we need to be ahead of the attacker.
Yeah, I can agree to that. Alexey, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's an interesting topic. Is definitely, if we were talking about the attacks in general, I guess we can see an upward trend, but also there is so much specialization in specific areas of security, kind of a broad term of like, what are the specific things and what are specific victims and targets and things like those, and who is being attacked and things like those. And there I could say that I think some of the organizations would definitely have already had setups for remote work and things like those, and those largely would not have to implement any additional things. Whereas some other organizations would have to, produce some emergency solutions for people to get access to what they used to only get access in the office remotely. And when they have to do that, that's a big challenge, because I think a lot of those gateways and VPNs and things that were deployed in an emergency are definitely easily compromisable. And also, not everybody is actually publishing their services, even without, with a sense of security, even with a VPN or some kind of a perimeter, which I guess Almog will talk a bit more about. But people are just publishing their services online, which are not supposed to be public, and that is definitely a big issue right there.
Yeah, I agree. And also, thank you, Alexey. And also a big thank to you, the wonderful birds that are singing as you speak. It's amazing. That can stay unnoticed. Good. Olesya, would you like to also contribute to this question?
Yes, I would like to add to this all the previous guys said. Yes, it's everything we see here is the same in banking industry and in financial sector as well. But the main problem is now it's not only sophisticated attacks and highly techniques, but also social engineering methods that criminals used to attack banks or banks' clients. All attacks that we see now, they all are started from the very simple things such as emails or phone calls. And after that, a huge amount of money and banks got lost and their clients as well. So it's the main threat, and we can say now only about technical part of cyber criminals, but also we have to speak about social engineering methods that which they are used. That's all that I wanted to add. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a good subject that you mentioned. That it starts really in simple way from either a call or from an email, and my thinking was that eventually people should react less on that, because we all know that it's you shouldn't respond to someone you don't know really promising you something you might not really deserved, or giving you for free. So do you see any dynamics either it's decreasing now or increasing, and probably what age groups and what demographics are more sensitive to that?
We see during COVID-19, and not only here in Ukraine, all countries reported that it was a decrease of such a type of fraud, because when people do not understand what is going on, and they are in such a situation when everything is changing, they are very good prepared for such calls or such emails. They do not know what emails they can receive, what emails are allowed or what not. And in this mess, it's very good background for using of social engineering fraud. And we see such attacks not only on commercial organizations, so also there were attacks in Europe on governmental organizations. So it's methods that are used for can be used for everybody, for any type of organization and any type of client, is it individual or corporate bank's client. Concerning demographics, there is no such measurement as far as different types of social engineering fraud work for different demographic groups, and there is very big differences between attacks that are actual for banks and that are actual for banks' clients. So there is no one common decision what group is we have to work with to raise its awareness in these questions.
Good. Thank you, Olesya. Almog, would you like to contribute?
Yeah, sure. I think that to understand the new risks, we need to understand what has changed. For example, what has changed in our business operations? Do we have employees working from home? Are they working with their personal devices, etc.? We also need to consider the new threat landscape and how hackers have changed their methods. That will enable us to better prepare and adapt our security strategies. I think that the world around us is changing. It's like my mother understood that in order to seed her grandchildren, she's a technophobe. She had to learn how to operate Zoom. So as the shift that is going on in the consumer area, a lot of organizations, a lot of industries, a lot of geographies are being open or more and more open to enable working from anywhere because they want to keep their business running. So I think that we are during the change. I think that there are a few things that are clear to us, but I think that the world is changing and we need to recalculate our strategy forward and to remember that we cannot focus the future accurately. So agility and agile technologies is key. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Almog. And I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on the cybersecurity strategies, as Almog mentioned. And Alex, I have a question to you. So, when defining a cybersecurity strategy, can you name what most common mistakes that companies make when they create such strategies and then implement them?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. Well, to start with is that they don't understand that it's a strategy. So they think of it as putting patches or putting band-aids to mitigate the risks of cybersecurity attacks. I say that in terms of that companies think that buying stuff is going to help them. And we've seen a bunch of companies that they already bought everything that could be bought. Think about firewalls, UTMs, IPSs, IDSs, endpoint security, whatever. But it's either not being monitored or it's not being managed correctly. And the thing here is that everything starts with the user. And Alexey was saying something very important. Obviously, we are seeing very sophisticated attacks, but most of the times it's just about going back to the basics. I mean, we see passwords that are in clear text written somewhere or in the server or in a post-it note. And that's something that starts with the user. So every strategy has to start with a cultural-based strategy that comes from the C-level all the way to the everyone involved and that touches data, that is partners, alliances, providers, whoever touches data that has to do with the company has to be involved in this cultural change or cultural understanding of cybersecurity in terms of awareness. So the main thing is, as I said, one of the things is not to think about the user as the main reason of why cybersecurity attacks can be exploited, and that it starts with the awareness. So there has to be an awareness campaign within the company that gets carried as any other awareness campaigns that go on with the company, that is involved and focused on cybersecurity. The other thing is relying only on products and thinking that just by buying something, it's going to be able to counteract any other cyber attacks that can happen. They have to be obviously bought or they have to be installed or implemented, but they have to be part of this strategy that involves everyone in the company. The other mistake that we've seen is that some companies believe that the responsibility of cybersecurity relies on only one person, on only one department. And this is something that is not true. It is responsibility of everyone within the company, because it only takes one person to click on something to get a USB inside of one of the computers or connect from a computer that is infected from home to be able to get into the company, right? So it's something that is very important to have a real strategy, to understand where we stand as a company or as an organization, and be able to do all the hardening in all the areas. And that involves process, controls, and not only the digital stuff. So the main thing is, as I said, the user, not rely only on products, and have a complete strategy that starts from the C-level. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I would like to move to Olesya. Olesya, for the banking industry, let's see a little bit let's look a little bit closer to how banks operate. So, how is the overall landscape currently with cyber threat is looking like, and how do you feel banks are currently affected?
Actually, nothing significantly has changed according to COVID-19. So we see that banks that can organize remote work, they work this way. That cannot, they continued and organize some processes inside of bank to respond to current threats. But we didn't fix any attacks in our region that are very specific for banking sector. And this trend is actual for a lot of previous years because the most terrible for banking industry attack is apt attack, and all of them are targeted mostly European countries or countries abroad, the post-Soviet area, because people that are conducted that attacks are from our countries. They mostly do not attack the banks in our region, although a few 5 or 4 years ago we have such trends. So attacks are the most sensitive attack for banks because it can lead to great amount of losses, and bank never will know in what area it will be because criminals live in bank infrastructure, and they are looking for such sick places that they can attack and which way they can move money from the bank. So of course all the banks and in our region and also in Europe, they organize the events and they have their strategy to protect from such attacks, but they cannot protect their clients from the same types of attacks. They cannot protect their corporate clients. And big banks that work with corporate clients, they also pay a lot of attention to raising awareness and raising the level of information security inside of their corporate clients. They even give some seminars for them. They try to give their knowledges to such companies to protect them from such kinds of attacks. As far as not only apt attacks, impersonation fraud that targeted a lot of big companies, SEO fraud, back fraud, that is all such actual threats that combined technical possibilities of criminals with common social engineering methods, with these emails, phone calls, and so on. So as Alex says, it must be strategy, and in most of banks, of course, they have such strategies. But even the smallest thing in this strategy could lead to not very good results, and we have seen during previous years a lot of attacks in East countries, where, in my understanding, was not very good level of information security, and that leads to such great losses of banks.
Right. Thank you very much, Olesya. And I would love to move to Alexey and see how security companies are preparing for raising threats caused by shifting online. So you guys really have to stay and react quicker than anyone right now.
Yeah, and I think security companies is a really broad, term. Is there is a lot of different vendors and who produce products for companies, as well as those who provide services. And I think a lot of the vendors have definitely used COVID, whether it actually they had actual grounds for this or not, to definitely scale up their marketing and sales and things like those, which is definitely to be expected and really understandable. From what I've seen across various areas, I think one of the things in their report that people have been reporting is that specifically phishing and denial of service attacks have scaled pretty much the same way as COVID scaled, where other attacks have not increased in the same specific trend, potentially had various increases in certain areas and even decreases in other areas. But I think, the phishing and denial of service were the primary things. And in there, I think that the problems, how do we prepare is how do we make sure that we can help customers address the issues that they're going to experience in the best way. So I think it's best to talk about the issues that the customers may experience And as they move, I think it really, again, depends on the company or the business that actually is going to undergo the changes. The small companies that don't necessarily have their own IT departments and blue teams and red teams and solid security posture, they are going to have to struggle with bringing their services online and enabling those things, and that will definitely be something that people will need help with. I think another thing is, as you migrate things from one place to another, there's going to be a lot of data loss accidents and things like those. And even when this is not entirely malicious, it's also kind of a security problem that has to be solved one way or another. I think there is definitely going to be change in how people are. How the attackers, and again, if we break down the attackers from like the regular mid-level kind of attacker who actually just has the targets people broadly and APTs, I think that some of the lateral movement in the first group may take a hit because of the changes in the in the network setups and things like those. However. In general, I think, one of the things that was brought up again about this question with e-commerce, like, are we being targeted, or is this something that is happening in general? I can state that we've actually seen a spike in e-commerce, e-commerce properties being targeted in various ways by basically executing untrusted code on their checkout pages, just like the author of the question pointed out, where the attacks can be, the attacks can be execution of certain untrusted code, which originated either from network injections, from more compromised networks that we've seen during COVID, from endpoint. Again, people are starting to work from home, and we can see that people's endpoints are infected, and therefore the checkout pages are also susceptible to those things. As people from infected endpoints visit those checkout pages, we've definitely seen a spike there. And I think in addition to that, definitely skimming and other types of attacks and trying to collect as much data as possible from the users from e-commerce properties has also been a big case. So people definitely, work on building a product for this. At Clean, we also definitely work on producing solutions for e-commerce merchants and stores for protecting their users and their customer journey and journey hijacking.
Thank you very much, Alexey. Let's look at things from the digital identity perspective. So we have a question to you, Dick. What are the biggest issues right now in managing identity and also access to the remote workforce?
Well, managing digital identity is a very broad topic, but on the remote workforce, you've got, for many organizations, they were using VPNs, and that model of like, let's build a fence around our corporate network and we trust everybody inside. That obviously isn't true when almost everybody is outside now, and the VPN infrastructure is falling over. So people are frustrated as they're trying to connect. They don't really have the bandwidth they can. They take shortcuts just to get their work done, which then opens them up to other, attack vectors. So there's been definitely a surge in, zero trust, beyond corp, identity-based identity, which are just different phrases for effectively the same thing. One of the other big issues is, particularly, I think Europe's has been able to deal with this better, but in the US, as I'm sure everybody not in the US has seen in the news, we've sucked so far at managing COVID, and there's lots of, the kids are at home, the parents are at home, particularly in lower economic households. There's a shortage of devices. The kids are trying to use the devices. The parents are trying to use some of the same devices to work. The bandwidth might not be happening, right? The servers are accessing, the healthcare servers are slammed, right? Everything just isn't working well. And so it's much more likely for people to go and do the wrong thing and click the wrong thing. You know, as we've talked about before, you know, there's people that are the late adopters of going online, either from a work point of view and or a home point of view. They just don't have the back, you know, they haven't been online. And so they don't really know all the things that might happen. They don't know what best practices are. And so, you know, the attack surface area, I would imagine, is massive now from an attacker point of view, right? This is the golden years for, you know, a malicious user, right? This is a gold mine of being able to go and hit all kinds of stuff.
Right. Yeah, I can agree to that. Speaking of, you mentioned zero trust, and I wanted to address this question to Almog. So can you share a little bit about this concept? What is zero trust?
Sure. So the zero trust model has two sides. On one hand, you do not trust any entity inside or outside of the perimeter at any time. And on the other hand, you secure, manage, and monitor every device, user, app, and network being used to access business data. And the most important thing to remember here is that zero trust isn't really zero trust, as you do need to actually trust your zero trust provider. There are a lot of solutions in this area. So before embarking on a zero trust journey, because it is a journey, you need to consider the coverage of your needs, the privacy issues, security, and user experience. And there is a real need for advanced secure access that will ensure business continuity without risking your network and assets, and will at the same time optimize your IT resources, because I think that, as I said before, I think that the world around us is changing, and we are expecting a recession that has already started. So security and IT departments will have to find a way to do more with less, and to optimize as possible the resources consumption. So I think that working with systems which are simple to implement and maintain and automate as possible in order to deal with incidents effectively, this is something which is very important nowadays. In general, I think that the world now understands that we need to disconnect between the user and the device and the physical location. And we need to put the network context out of the equation, even though we need to deal with use cases of users coming from within the organizational network and from the outside as external users. So,
Gotcha. Good. Thank you, Almog. Guys, I wanted to say that we are getting closer to like 10 minutes left before we shift to the Q&A session. So I was given a red flag from our team here, and we haven't covered even 50% of the questions. So I'm picking up most important that I think they are. So let's try to approach as much as possible within the remaining 10 minutes. So I have a question to Alex. So we talked a lot about like if we have IT departments who are responsible to implement its strategies, or if they are responsible, or if everyone is responsible within the company, where the strategy is coming from and it started from. But what if companies or small businesses, they don't have a chance, or they don't have capacity within to have their own security department, and they have to move those operations and expect that a security vendor will come in to you, to your organization, and will solve the problems for you. So what are there any like best the best guide how to evaluate those vendors?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, first of all, it's important to mention that as a service model is what comes in best for these small companies. As you said, they cannot take care of all the investment that has to be done with all the platforms and the human resources needed to carry security operations 24/7. So they have to rely on someone else to do that for them. But the important thing here is to see it as a service, in the model as a service, as we've seen it with infrastructure, with applications, and with everything else. So that is what small companies and also what we've seen in market research is the way that this thing is moving, and it's more in the managed services way. So to start with that, I think that the company has to look for something or a company that looks trustworthy. I could say that they can look at certifications, if they have the ISO certification, and also if their analysts are certified. But I think that since they are going to be carrying the business operations from the security perspective, they need to trust that company, and that trust worthiness comes from even like having an interaction with the person and seeing if they are actually also passionate about security. We've seen tons of companies that first of all, because they want to get into the managed service revenue model, they hook up the company and they start giving the service without even doing an assessment first and finding where the company stands. And before you can get into the prevention part of it, you have to see where the company stands and do all the hardening that has to be involved to be able to say that you are preventing a security problem. So look for a company that is passionate about security, that is not passionate only about making money, but that they're passionate about making sure that nothing happens, or at least that the least of the things happen to the company, right? And the thing here is they have to be able to understand the business model, which is also something that is why it's very important to trust the company, because the security company has to understand what is what could be the difference between a malicious behavior or a false positive. Even the company could be carrying operations, I don't know, worldwide or not. And that's something that they have to detect to be able to say, okay, well, this connection that is coming from China, it's probably something bad, right? But they have to get into the company. They have to understand how the information flows within the company's organization and data flows. So first of all, I would say that it has to be a company or the analysts that are going to be involved with the project. They have to be passionate about it, and the company has to detect that they are passionate and that they are trustworthy. And obviously, as I said, they have to focus in models that are as a service, so that they only get charged for what the protection is being held on, and that they understand not only the cybersecurity part of it, but also the information security part of it, which is the information that flows and that is not related only to the digital part of it. So I have to be quick, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you,
I hope
Alex.
that helps.
Yeah. Okay. Also trying to be quick. Olesya, we have a question to you, and I'm really also interested in this question myself, because it relates to GDPR, and GDPR has made like hard times for us as it started. So now having everyone accessing their workplace remotely, do you see any actions to still keep privacy and information security while having to comply with GDPR regulations and having to combine this mode?
As all previous speakers said, that information security or cybersecurity, it's not a state, it's a process. So in case if something is changing in your infrastructure, in your procedures, also you have to review everything that was changed, and it is the same you have to do according to GDPR. If you started to operate with personal data of your clients in another way, or you have another companies that help you to make these operations, you always have to review all the processes and to organize such ways that you have to be compliant to all these requirements first, and And keeping in mind that you are not only compliant to something that is written somewhere, but you also make compliant your company to risks that are actual now on the market. And your company becomes more stronger if your processes are compliant to these requirements. So we cannot say that it's influence. If you have not some procedures that are written in GDPR, and you have not such procedures that include this reviewing of all of your processes, of course you are. It cannot be. You can say that you are compliant or you have GDPR. It's not the state; it's a process, and that is what we have all understand.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you, Olesya. Alexey. So I have a question about going to cloud. So we see a trend that a lot of businesses going to cloud. And in your opinion, how is it secure? Do companies need to keep in mind something moving there?
I think it's not necessarily going to cloud or having cloud as a destination of is secure or insecure. Because as we all, I guess, know, is cloud is basically just someone else's computer, and it's going to and switching and migrating somewhere that actually is probably posing most challenges. Is while doing so, you have to change the processes that you've built, and those processes will likely follow various or include various guidelines that are no longer relevant, as well as include some guidelines that, or do not include some guidelines that are actually, they actually have to be there. And basically, as everybody said before, in security, it's the process. And in this process, maintaining the compliance standards and ability to be able to, conform to certain rules is a challenge there. And also training and awareness is a challenge as well, as people have to switch to new environments and use various new things and things like those. That's a big challenge, especially for small businesses who don't necessarily maintain their own pen test teams or blue teams and teams that can basically continuously help them with the security process. Figuring out the right vector prioritization of what to test first and how to check those things first is a great step. But also, one of the things that, if we talk also about small businesses and how they begin protecting, it's about also asset management and understanding what they have in the beginning prior to actually starting to protect things and buying things to protect without monitoring and things like those, like others mentioned as well. And once you've sorted asset management and figured out understanding your attackers and what you'd like to do, I think one of the other things is definitely figuring out a way to manage the contract teams that do pen tests or blue teams or assessments or things like those. And for small businesses who are doing that, it's going to be hard for them to do it, maintain the full team. So they have to maintain a coordinator on their end to be able to manage those things and share learnings across the assessment. As this is the key thing for them to not invest into the exact same thing twice or a lot of times.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Alexey. So 3 minutes, 2 questions. Yeah, so let me start from the one that I have both to Alex and to Dick. So guys, you have really impressive long experience, and I'm not sure that it's allowed to disclose this information, but I just wanted to give it a try. So throughout the whole history that you remember, what was the most tremendous and really impressive attack that you can recall? That really shaken the world, and also if you see any patterns from the past to be repeated these days.
I'm also doing the same, thinking in my head. Well, I this one is not about the world, but it's something that was very shocking for us, and it was This information was not disclosed. I am not going to say the names, but it is
Sure.
a big bank, and we did some forensic analysis on it, and it is very interesting, and that's why I also said what I said at the beginning about the most common mistakes. And we're talking about a bank, and this is actually a very big bank, and the thing here was that they had all sorts of technology to carry security operations, and in some of the cases they even had two of them. So they had two endpoint security platforms, and that was actually the problem. They were not playing together. They were not playing okay with each other, and the attacker was able to put in malware from a year before the attack was made. So the thing here is to understand that the attacker might be working on it for years before the attack it actually gets exploited. And just because we don't have a lot of time, the thing here was it was a transaction. It was a $50 million transaction, and it was being sent to a bank, or actually not a bank. It was a donation to a church in North Korea. And the thing here is, well, the bank is not in North Korea, so it was something that was being held internationally. And the only reason the transaction didn't go through, it was because of a time zone thing that helped them, because the money was already transferred to a U.S. bank, which was the intermediary between this bank in this country and the church in North Korea. And the thing here is that they were able to figure that out, that the money was not there anymore. So they hurried to the phone and called the bank in the US. Is like, don't do that transaction, please, because it was already accepted and everything. So the thing that saved them was not a process or a security, cybersecurity control or anything. It was just luck. So it's something that's shocked us, because you had all the technology, you had a SOC put in place, you had all the platforms taking care of it, and the shocking part is that this is something that was planned and actually being carried for a year or two before that. So, and that's something that stood up on us. Thank you.
Yeah, really shocking. Dick, would you like to contribute?
Well, the really interesting ones I can't talk about, unfortunately, which is, I think all of us were like trying to think of like, okay, which one's actually public? But one of them that I think is a lesson for the audience was the Capital One breach that happened a couple of years ago. A woman that had used to work in Amazon in AWS, breached and compromised some Capital One data. And that breach happened because of a misconfiguration in Capital One's accounts. And it was even more grievous because there are systems in AWS that alert you about misconfigurations, and the team just ignored all of those things and sort of thought, oh, we know what we're doing. And I think that goes to a bigger lesson, which is, that you'd asked about, is the cloud safe? I think it was Alexey that answered that, and I fully agree with them. The biggest risk is the transition as opposed to the cloud. I would argue that the cloud is likely significantly safer than on-premise equipment because you've got a team that's just focused on making it secure, right? I worked with the AWS security team for quite a while when I was in Amazon, and the types of attacks they see, and the edges. Almost all of our time is spent on addressing internal threats as opposed to external threats, because the external threats are there. And so the biggest threat's really somebody that doesn't have the organization's best interests in mind. And so there's a lot of time spent on dealing with that. So you've got people that's what they're doing all the time. Another example would be, there's the rise of what's called CIAM, Customer Identity and Access Management. And so there's a number of vendors, the federation vendors like Ping and Okta offer that, as well as people focus on it, Login Radius and Auth0. And so if you're a smaller organization, it's unlikely you've got a really sophisticated security team. Go and use a service where people, that's all they do is worry about that. And they're going to build, it's going to be cheaper for you, and it's going to be much more secure than you trying to roll it yourself, right? You may think, oh, I don't want to pay that money, but at the end of the day, it's going to be less expensive and significantly more secure.
Yeah. Thank you, Dick. Good. So I'll be a little bit already late, but my last question, it will go to Almog. So we all discussed that we really need to achieve more but having less funds. And I wanted to ask about overall investments going currently into cybersecurity industry. So Cyolo raised 4.2 million during the crisis. So Almog, how it's currently happening in terms of investment overall in this industry? Oh, you are again on mute. Still there.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Cyolo has closed its seed funding due with COVID-19, and I believe that part of it had to do with the urgency of needing true secure connectivity. We still see a lot of investments going on despite the pandemic. But however, I do think that we will see more investments in cybersecurity solutions that have a direct impact on the business continuity. So I think that the right phrase to quote nowadays is less security and more business continuity, because a lot of businesses just want to keep their business running. And there are two things that needs to be done. The first is to enable the business continue operating, and on the other hand, to do it effectively without compromising the security. And it is a challenge. And I think that a lot of solutions, a lot of technologies that will support the new world that I was talking about, challenges, will still get funded, because there are problems that needs to be solved. So I hope that I answered the question.
Yes, thank you very much. So I think we can shift to the questions and answers session right now. And we have a waiting list of questions. And I can see that the one about either it's a trend or it's an attack was moved down a bit, and we have other questions on top. So I think I should be starting just from the first one. Okay, so how can employees that are now working from home protect themselves against cyber attacks? So it's not rather for businesses, but for employees themselves. I don't know who would be willing to address this question. So Dick, would you like to join?
I just got one quick piece of advice, which is make sure you understand and follow the best practices that your organization is giving you around what to do. Almost all organizations, particularly larger ones, have a best practice.
Right. Alexey, would you like to contribute too?
Yeah, I was actually going to say pretty much the same thing, that I think definitely employees in general can be tricky to just give a general rule, because employees of a different organization have different policies in there, and definitely will be needing to expect those things from the IT department. I think one additional piece of or a few additional pieces of feedback about this is that they should know who to contact in case they suspect that something's going on, and they should deal with that beforehand. And they should also watch out for the things that the usual, I guess, phishing and things like this. As we know that we've discussed and on the market research right now, that we've seen that phishing has actually had a surge related to COVID specifically, and utilizing those things. I think some of the companies and enterprises do not actually allow use of COVID and other things in simulations of threats and social engineering simulations. However, they probably should allow that, as that actually is some of the biggest things that actually is getting used right now. So I think watching out for those things, for phishing, and knowing who to contact if you suspect something bad happened immediately, and having channels for that communication is critical.
Thank you very much, Alexey. Let's move on to another question. So the top candidate one is still this bot question. So do you guys feel we've said enough about that, or if anyone wants to say something more on that? So we detected and blocked a bot doing credit card testing on our checkout page. And is that a general trend across all e-com websites, or are we being targeted? So Alex, would you like to comment?
Yeah, sure. I guess I already said a little bit about it, and the answer is yes to both, which is yes, it is a trend, and as I was saying before, there is a lot of now more automated ways of doing attacks, and that's what we've seen. These botnets are attacking or searching or analyzing the whole internet all the time. So anything that comes up will be targeted, and the thing here is that they are able to detect what kind of website is being uploaded, and from there do a more sophisticated, or not sophisticated, but direct attack based on what they saw. We know for sure that organized crime has been hiring security analysts for quite some time now, and that they are creating structures that are even more stable or more structured, to say it that way, than most of the companies are. They do have a COO, a CISO, even a CMO, which is something very quite interesting, because they have a quota that they need to meet in a quarterly basis. So basically what we tell our customers is that it is not something that is personal to you, or I mean, and the way they say it is like, oh, am I being targeted? It sounds like almost like, oh my God, they're attacking me, right? I feel bad about it, but I mean, it's not personal. They do have a quota and they need to meet it, so they're gonna attack anyone that can, where they can exploit the attack. So basically, they send first these botnets to make sure that they find all these sites that are either vulnerable or that they transact with money, and they move it to a different stage that they are going to analyze it even further, because as I said, they have a quota that they need to meet. And basically, so yes to both, and anything that comes on the internet nowadays is going to be targeted. As sometimes we say, it is like the internet is now an extension of us. So even if we go to sleep, the cloud is still there, our accounts are still there, and our e-commerce site is still there, right? So if it were a physical store, it's not because it is after hours that you close it. No, that store is open all the time. So at night and weekends or whatever, right? So they are gonna try to attack it, and they are gonna see if it has a vulnerability, then they are gonna be trying to exploit it later on, and they have all the time of the world. So yeah.
I can also add to this that I think in e-commerce specifically, there are definitely fraudulent transactions, which can be one of the pieces of the big puzzle. The other big piece is how are these credit cards that are being attempted thereafter are collected, and those also are collected via compromised stores themselves. When the credit cards are loaded, and kind of users become victims of various skimming and things like those online. In addition to that, again, users are being infected more and more as more users get online and more users do shopping online. Users are getting infected, and we're definitely seeing spikes in those trends. But also, like in terms of targeted, I think one additional piece of feedback that I haven't said before is that we have actually seen attacks which inject into the specific websites one way or another, into the user sessions between the e-commerce store and the actual user, and those get sometimes there are specific callouts for specific stores and specific areas and specific vulnerabilities in specific stores. So there is definitely going a lot of specific targeted would call out to specific names and specific stores, which I won't name right now, but definitely there is a lot of things that are happening in a targeted way as well as broadly in general.
Thank you very much, Alexis. Thank you, Alex. So we have a next candidate. I think we can address this question to Almog. So what changes of the attacking behavior are observed during COVID? Almog, you're doing this again.
Sorry. I think that as all of us are working from home, the attackers are working from home, and I think that there is a trend of attackers trying to exploit the situation of everyone is not in the organization. So we are seeing a lot of attacks against management interfaces of the organization, for example, and resources and services that are accessible from the outside. So I think that secure access from the internet or minimizing the attack surface from the internet is always something that we need to take care of. But nowadays, it's way more stronger and bigger risk. And I think that one of the things that is very important, and we talked about digital identity, and we mentioned a little bit zero trust. So zero trust is all about continuous identity verification before granting access. So I think that credential theft nowadays will have a dramatic impact even more than before, because a lot of organizations had to open up a lot of things, as all of you mentioned, in order to provide the employees the ability to do their work. So two things: the exposure from the internet, and theft of IDs. I think these are things that we need to be bothered about nowadays.
Thank you very much, Almog. And also speaking about identity, we have another question here about upcoming period and the year 2021. So where do you see privacy and identity in 2021? Dick, would you like to start?
Sure. From a privacy point of view, there's definitely accelerated protection happening in modern browsers and in mobile operating systems, where they're locking down more and more the tracking that's being done, which is partly for advertising and partly for other reasons. That's really stuff that's behind the scenes. You've seen Apple now, privacy is kind of like one of their core products per se. You see that embedded in almost everything they're doing. And you're seeing Google trying to respond to that. Not sure if Facebook's thinking enough about that yet. A challenge, though, is that as they crank down these things, is that they often make it harder for, single sign-on and a number of other identity services, because they wipe all the tracking. And so it makes it harder for other platforms to know, does this look like it's the same user, which is a signal often used for knowing, okay, I've seen this user on this device before, but it's gone now. And so they don't have as much signal as they had to protect the user before. So that's an unfortunate thing. I think in a enterprise context, we're going to see, hopefully, we're going to see an increase in the number of firms and particularly smaller firms using single sign-on, which will help protect them, as opposed to having an employee having accounts at all the different services. They'll have an account at one place and be able to centrally manage that, which will help from an identity point of view. From a user point of view, and COVID just exploding the number of accounts and passwords people have, and so that is just becoming more and more of a problem. So hopefully we'll see people move into password managers, and my new venture, signin.org, is really around how do we give consumers sort of that enterprise single sign-on like experience instead of having to have different accounts at every place with different login credentials.
Right. Thank you very much, Dick. Guys, any of you want to contribute to this question before we move on to the next one?
I could add that we also have to speak about identification and payments as far as the new approaches to identify persons during payments is going on. We have now Face ID, Touch ID, and different touch trends. So I see it will be the future in some next years, but I cannot forecast what type of attacks criminals will make to overcome these new types of identification. I understand that they will be, but I do not have any forecasts about it. So now its new type of identification is very effective on the moment, but what will be in future is difficult to say.
Yeah, we'll see. Good. So we have a question that collected really a lot of votes compared to all of the rest, and it's pretty practical. So if you were to pick one social network or messenger, security-wise, which would be the one? Okay, Almog, let's try if you can speak already unmuted.
So I think that a lot of social services and social networks are providing pretty good security in aspects of data on transit, and I think that the concern here is a little bit different, as we were talking about putting your personal data or organizational data on someone else's hands. So I don't know which is better, but I think that, and personally speaking, I think that preserving your own life to your own as possible, it's something that is worth considering, because if it's out there, it is potentially can get to the wrong hands.
Yeah,
this is my point of view.
Which messenger do you use?
So I use all of them. I use all of them.
Right. Okay. Anyone else wants to contribute?
Well, to go on Almog's point, like you need to use the messenger that the person you want to message is using, right? And so a challenge, well, you may pick, oh, this is the one I want to use. If the people you want to message aren't on it, it doesn't matter. From which one has the best security. As much as I don't like some of the privacy aspects and other things around Facebook and WhatsApp, they've got a massive team that focuses an awful lot on security. And they've got some of the most advanced modern authentication that's looking for anomaly detection to see, does it look like someone's got your password? But if they do, then they'll see, oh, that doesn't really look like you, and they'll provide additional challenges. But I think from a transit point of view, many of them are all pretty solid, as Almog says. But just like him, I use almost all of them.
I would like to add the same about social networks. As far as everything depends what are you sharing with. A lot of attacks use social engineering methods begins from the information that individuals or companies have posted in their social networks, and based on this information, it is not very difficult to create a profile of company and to understand all nets and what all business connections and so on. So you have to be very careful when you posted something in social network. It's not only for your friends; everybody can use it.
Yeah, from my end, I think I can add that it's definitely hard to say which messengers to use, because as Dick said, you have to use the messenger that the other person is using. But if you're choosing a messenger, I think some of the things that you can look at is what data the messenger has about you, and how it publishes, whether it publishes what it does with that data. If it discloses that data, can it give it to the authorities? Who are the legal authorities around that messenger's legal entity and things like those. In addition to that, understanding another important piece of feedback, I think, is the defaults, because definitely defaults are what is used by most people. People don't really necessarily go in and customize the settings on their chats and things like those. So whichever messenger provides defaults with end-to-end encryption and things like those would probably be better suited if you were interested in not giving as much information about your chats to the company that owns the messenger.
Thank you, Alexey. Okay, I was given a signal that it's time to move to the last part, and I just had one question to Alexey because I think it lands perfectly to you. But like if there is a chance that we just give a short answer, that would be awesome. So, what recommendations could you give us to start being a specialist in cybersecurity?
I think I wanted to agree with what Alex was saying before about being passionate about it. And I think that is one of the things that really drives the interest. Cybersecurity is such a broad domain and such a broad set of things. And I think one of the things that is interesting about it is that it's really hard to give a short answer to this, but one of the things that's interesting is I think nowadays there is a lot of talks about full stack developer. I think being in cybersecurity is actual full stack, because you have to understand a lot of things from all the way down of how it works on the CPU level to all the way up on how it works in the very abstract concepts. And being, having an open mind, being very passionate about understanding how things work, and just going and starting, interning or participating in some teams and things like those, trying to do those things, and always keeping looking out for more things and more information. I guess that's the small shortest answer I could give. Sorry.
That's a wonderful advice. Thank you very much, Alexey. Okay, time is up. So I wanted to thank our wonderful speakers today. Thank you very much, guys, for your time, for the insight that you shared, for giving brilliant ideas to our audience. And I'm really happy to be here today with you. And also, I wanted to thank our audience for staying with us tonight and for really interesting questions. I'm sorry that we didn't have time to answer all of them, but I think we can look at them later, like offline, and try answering if anything really stayed unanswered, and do that offline and share as a follow-up to this session. So a couple of other thank you words. This webinar happened thanks to the main organizers, Sigma Software, and the co-organizer Upnotch, and also partners Zach and Sigma Software Labs. And as usually, we will share the recording of this session later via email. And follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and stay tuned. Thank you, team. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.